of refining. Refining metals, I don't think, is ever done in a cold fashion. It always involves lots of heat. And it, in fact, often reorders the very molecular structure of metal because of heat and pressure in the refining process. And I think God is looking for us to be reformed on the molecular level in regards to our spirit, in regards to our soul. It's not a surface thing, it's a structural thing. And God is looking to shape us into people that He can spend eternity with. And that's a blessing that we can enjoy. So we've talked about stress and anxiety last week, or last Wednesday, and kind of the fact that, you know, this crucible, this furnace is in fact going to be part of all of our lives. And it may be that we bear these things because God is trying to change our hearts. And so it's not always the most positive approach to try to remove the stressor by ignorance of it or denying that it's there or pushing it out of your mind, because it may be placed there by God on a purpose in order to get us to wake up to the reality of who we are and how we're living. And it's a tool God can use to bring us back to our spiritual senses, so to speak. We've seen this in individuals. We may know people, we may have people in our family that are like this, where there's a sense of detachment or lack of connection. And this can be a long-term problem, and I want to just explore this idea a little bit and what we might be able to do in regards to understanding the nature of this distance that some people place between themselves and even life around them sometimes, even what is going on in their experiences. This might be referred to as ambivalence disorder, but it's a recognition of a state of being that has several ways to reveal itself, several manifestations. One may have difficulty empathizing. They may feel isolated. They may prefer their own company to anyone else's. There's often a lack of caring for others, and there's difficulty in opening up and sharing and express the thoughts that are in their minds, in their hearts. They may end up having poor listening skills. There's just a distance there that it's difficult to close the gap, to have good, solid communication. So whether this is a temporary response to a trauma or a long-term response due to perhaps prior abuse, this disorder can block the formation of positive, healthy relationships. We may have to work with someone like this. We may have someone in our family. Understanding the causes of the trauma are significant to dealing with the detachment. Exploring past for neglect or inadequate treatment from childhood. Using excessive positive reinforcement to encourage adherence to treatment and talk therapy. To understand attachment. It's really an internal defense mechanism. It's a safety device that this individual has often formulated or conjured up to defend them from perception of harm. Someone may want to keep everyone at distance so that no one can hurt them. In other words, if I don't involve myself in the lives of others, then I'm not impacted by their lives. If I choose to be a poor listener and I just don't open up and I have trouble making and keeping friends because of my detachment, it's quote unquote safe to do that, but at the price of having true friendships, true relationships, true love for others, which is really a core of Christian living. Really at the core. The ability to love someone outside yourself. The ability to love God, the ability to love your neighbors. Upon this hangs what? All the law and the prophets. Yes, Aaron?
I know we see this a lot in clinical depression. People will want to turn inward and kind of isolate themselves. Is this even deeper than that? Is this a deeper rooted problem, or is this kind of a result of a depression side?
So because there's many manifestations, there are many ways this reveals itself, there can also be many causes, I think. I'm not a clinician, but I believe there could be many causes. I don't think this is necessarily a manifestation of a state of depression. I think this is more often a defense mechanism against some trauma or harm, whether real or perceived. I mean, just always remember, in the mind of one who has chosen this mechanism to keep people at a distance, it may be because they have even a false sense of being victimized, or a false sense of being isolated, or a false sense of being different than everyone else. I think a lot of the way that the mind gets into a trap such as this is this perception that I'm the only one that has these experiences. I'm the only one that's seeing the world the way I see the world. And I don't understand why no one else sees the world the way I see the world. Generally speaking, as people who are very community-oriented, group-oriented, we like to feel like we fit in. We like to feel like we're part of what's going on. We like to feel like we know and understand the community around us, the people we interact with. And if one has a sense that no one gets me, no one sees the big picture, no one understands the things the way I do, I see and hear things differently. I interpret the world different than other people. I think this can lead to this sense of detachment and lack of connection with people. I think it could be lots of reasons, but I don't believe, from what I've read on the subject, that depression would necessarily be. People who are depressed like to isolate themselves, but this is a different set of realities where you're shutting out the world around you in many ways, and kind of you hear your own thoughts, but you don't hear other people very well. And I think that's why the reference here to excessive positive reinforcement. It's really going to take a lot of time and patience and investment to break through this kind of isolation. It's really going to take a lot of positive reinforcement, talking through your getting people to open up and talk about how they feel about things. But just getting them to listen and sit still for the conversation may be the first challenge. There may be nothing we can do other than understand and appreciate that their minds don't function the way we might expect others to function. But that doesn't mean that they're not, again, subject to God's grace and mercy. And God will decide how to deal with that individual of that mindset. But there are tools for bringing this forward and opening people up. John 14:27 says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give it to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." This is a person who doesn't live with much peace in their life. There's a stirring in their thinking that doesn't make sense to other people and doesn't make sense to themselves a lot of times. I think having to have this kind of detachment makes it hard for you also to evaluate your own thoughts and consider the reasonableness of them. But I think there's often just an underlying sense of wanting to pull back, wanting to keep a distance from everything that's going on around them. And it's a real struggle. This is part of the positive reinforcement, is talking about how God's nature is not to have us in a troubled mind. He doesn't want to see us live in a state of detachment or inability to create lasting friendships and lasting emotional connections. He would rather for us to be supported and settled in having those relationships. And it can be real difficult in order to break this pattern of thinking. There may be underlying medical conditions, there may be underlying hereditary conditions which can make this problem more significant. And again, I'm not asking us to be able to diagnose this and be able to, make medical recommendations. What I am saying is that we know these people. Maybe we have these tendencies ourselves. And it's just an appreciation for that this isn't a passing phase. This is not a passing phase. This is part of this person's thinking structure. To keep this distance, to just not open up, not listen, not be able to share. And it's not according to God's plan. It's not what he's looking for his people. Isaiah 41 says, "But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I've chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend, you whom I took from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest corners, saying to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you and not cast you off. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God." When this sense of isolation goes to the point where you can't have this relationship with God, it's important in terms of the positive reinforcement again to talk about how God wants this relationship with us, with each one of us. God is seeking to have a personal connection with all people. And when you live in a sense of you're different, your thoughts don't line up with the world, you don't understand why people don't understand you, it's really easy. I think Andrew and I were experiencing this week together. It's easy to say, when I hear you communicate, I see that you're trying to put on God the characteristics that are of men rather than a characteristic of God. You talk about God as if he has more of a human quality than a supernatural quality. And when one feels like all of humanity doesn't understand them, doesn't get them, it's often tempting to think, well, God doesn't get me either. God doesn't understand what I'm going through. God can't have a relationship with me because I can't have a relationship with people because of my fear, because of perhaps the trauma that I've experienced and how I'm trying to keep a distance. But we have to remember through all of this that, God's speaking to his nation, Israel, and calling them the chosen people. Always remember they weren't chosen because of the wonderful people that they were. They were chosen as part of a greater plan of salvation as a way of bringing the Messiah into the world. But God, as he talks to these people whom rejected him repeatedly, who ignored his words, who failed to comprehend his character, he tells these people that I have searched the far corners of the earth and I've said, I've chosen you and I've not cast you off. I chose you. You didn't choose me. I selected you as my preferred nation. And I went to great extremes in order to make that selection. And don't be afraid, because I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. Sometimes it feels like we're choosing God. Now we can choose to obey God, or we can choose to disobey God. But we don't choose God. This is his universe, not ours. And we can have that relationship with God. But God's intention is to have that relationship with all people. And I think that's, again, part of that positive reinforcement that needs to be part of this idea of lack of connection. Any thoughts or comments? I appreciate greatly you making contribution. I've lost my behavioral corner up here this morning, and they're always helpful in this regard. They're the professionals, and I'm not. Yes, Mary?
I think it's important for us to realize that mental health professionals use what we would identify as labels for a variety of purposes. One, to destigmatize some of the views of mental health in general, but also to help them in their diagnosis so that they have a better idea of course of treatment and a plan of action. And it's less important for us to worry about those kinds of things. I appreciate kind of looking at some of the nuances and differences of that, but it's less important for us to be able to identify what the specific difficulty mentally is that someone's facing and just recognize some of the symptoms and how we can be there to help them with those kinds of things. And to understand that if it's something that's deeply ingrained and doesn't just seem to be a passing thing, that it may be helpful for us to recommend that they try to reach out to some people who do better understand those kinds of things. Not because we don't want to deal with it, but because we're not really equipped to deal with it any more than I'm equipped to deal with a lot of physical ailments people face in the flesh. And so we recommend they go see a doctor. And so we can help them in that way, and then we can still be there, perhaps as a tool for the process that they're going to need to go through for healing. And the mental health professional may know that they need some of that kind of support, and we can let them know I'm here to help in whatever way that I can as you move forward in this journey. But important for us to recognize what our limitations are, just as we did, like I said, with the body.
Both times that I experienced a deep vein thrombosis or blood clot, which is life-threatening, by the way, my wife said, "You need to go to the hospital." And I said, "I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I have a leg cramp. I'm good." And she saved my life. She's not a medical doctor. She doesn't have medical training. She's got health training, for sure. But she saved my life twice. And I agree with you. I think I want to introduce these labels in order for us to think about specifically individuals that have certain characteristics, as opposed to knowing a plan of treatment, as you said, but recognizing that we can be an important connection. Because that's again where this is such a challenge, is this person who has this disconnection anxiety doesn't necessarily see anything wrong with the way they're thinking. They think everyone else is the one that's out of their mind in terms of logic and reason. It doesn't make sense that their thinking isn't right. And so if you can make that personal connection and help convince them that there could be tools in counseling, maybe just a medical doctor review of the circumstances, that it can open the doors to healing opportunities that we can't provide, but we can be the tool to help them get there. I appreciate that observation. Anything else?
Greg?
Yes.
Sometimes it's easier for us, if we're going through that situation, to go to someone who has been through it and knows how to deal with it, and we accept their information better than we would somebody that's never suffered that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. We don't have to have personal experience with mental unwellness in all aspects, but finding that sympathy is finding someone who can appreciate what that feels like. To feel isolated, to feel as though no one understands, to start to shut out the world because you don't want to hear what they have to say. You don't want to engage. You don't want to interact. And again, this is more of a state of mind beyond a passing phase. You know, there are times to be separate for particular reasons. We can talk about those in a little bit. But this is a little different. Luke 18 gives a shadow that may be this kind of a person. I'm not saying that they are, but you have the example of the prayer in the temple court, and I guess it's the steps of the temple, isn't it? I'm trying to remember now. Luke 18, and you have one who considers himself quite connected to God, quite the catch, he might think. Two men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other a tax gatherer. Luke 18, chapter, verse 10. The Pharisee stood and was praying thus to himself, "So God, I thank thee that I am not like other people, the swindlers, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax gatherer. I fast twice a week, I pay tithes of all that I get." But the tax gatherer, standing some distance away, was even unwilling to lift up his eyes to heaven, but was beating his breast, saying, "God, be merciful to me, the sinner." And I think that's an interesting choice of words. The tax gatherer probably looked at the Pharisee as a spiritual leader. He's not saying I'm better than the Pharisee because I'm being humble in your sight. The tax gatherer probably honors and respects the office of the duties, the role, the learning, the experience, the connection that man must have with God because of his station in life. And I think the tax gatherer actually honors that. Do you get that in what he says? He says, "Be merciful to me, the sinner." Not that good Pharisee over there, but me. But it's the Pharisee who does not have the ability to humble himself in the sight of the Lord. He doesn't have the connection with God that the tax gatherer does. He's the one that's isolated in his thinking. He's the one that looks down on other people and considers them less worthy. You imagine having a spiritual conversation between the Pharisee and the tax gatherer. You think the Pharisee's going to stop and ponder and listen intently to what the tax gatherer's got to say about a certain piece of holy writ? Or is he just going to, "What do you know, you swindler? What do you know about the Bible? What do you know about the Old Covenant? I'm the one that's got it all figured out." Now, was this a mental disorder on the part of the Pharisee? Sometimes the way they acted, you begin to wonder. It was kind of a groupthink problem. Yes, sir.
So, I'm speaking from my own experience here. I don't believe I was ever diagnosed with something like this officially, but came to my attention through counseling and things that a lot of the things that you identified I had and struggled with. And part of why I now understand I did that, and kind of what you're talking about with the Pharisee and the tax collector, is I didn't want to see the dissonance in how I was viewing myself and what I really was, the problems I actually had. I kind of see that with the two men in the story there. And what helped, in hindsight, I think, is having people who were there to set boundaries with me, to say, how you're reacting to this is not okay, and I'm not going to be a part of that, or, you need to go and find this kind of help, or else, these are going to be the consequences kind of things, and that constant sort of support, but also accountability in that way was really helpful, and I think probably one of the biggest things in coming through a lot of that.
Yeah, accountability, that's a great idea here, is that when someone is struggling and their thinking is skewed as if no one understands. I need to pull my thoughts back and keep them back. Is hold them to what they can be held to, I think is important. If that's daily function, if that's, being able to speak when you want something instead of grunting or using some passive-aggressive means to get what you want. There can be a sense of superiority again in this cycle of dwelling on your own thoughts and justifying your own thoughts and ideas to where you're just ready to dismiss what anyone else has to say. That we can find ways to hold accountable some basics that they're capable of in the midst of their struggle with reasoning through why they've gotten this trap, if possible. And again, it may take just the accountability of saying, you need help, and we're going to get you some help. And you're going to keep this appointment, and you're going to follow through on this, and you're going to do your journaling, and you're going to do your daily exercises and positive reinforcement thinking, and so on. I appreciate that coming from you. Yes, sir. Jim?
I was thinking, to me, what causes some of this depression gets you thinking wrong. You think about Galatians 5:23, 22 and 23. We got the fruits of the Spirit set forth there. And it begins with love and ends with temperance or moderation. We can overwork the body over a period of time, and it'll work on us and get us thinking wrong and get us depressed, and it'll put us on the shelf before it's time. We need to emphasize all the aspects of the fruit of the Spirit. It all works together to bless us all along the way. If it failed in either one of them, we have to pay for it.
Yeah, we talked about the fruits of the Spirit when we were talking about depression, and how when one is in that state of mind, it's hard to make that transition to say, dwelling on the negative constantly is what keeps me from recovery of my depression. Again, this person's in a long-term thinking pattern where we're going to have to be encouraging them about thinking things that are of good report and lovely and self-control. Self-control. They think they're under control. They think they've got it all together. The Pharisee was practicing self-control, wasn't he, when he was praying to God, I'm glad I'm not a sinner like this tax gatherer. But was his mind right? Was his thinking right? There's subtleties to how we think about the characteristics of a Christian and how it's so easy to be self-justified. This goes out of the realm of maybe mental wellness. I think it's more of the realm of human nature. I look at myself and say, I'm doing just fine. The Pharisee looked at himself and he said, I'm doing just fine. In fact, I'm better than everyone else, or at least better than this guy. We're quick to dismiss our own frailties and our own vulnerabilities when it comes to our relationship with God and one another. We think we're doing just fine. And we need those who care about us to hold us accountable, to encourage us to reach beyond where our comfort level is today regarding some of these thoughts. As I said, those who experience an ambivalence disorder may have a sense of superiority or a higher priority of one's own wishes. That's justified when they believe that others are just less worthy of our consideration as fellow sojourners. The practice of contempt is dismissiveness and disrespect for the humanity of others. And as you distance yourself, you lose connection with that humanity, the basic sharing of this world that we have with all humankind. We are all in this together. And there seem to be a lot of mental disorders these days which involve contempt and dismissiveness, in my opinion. And we won't go political, but I get a sense that people are more comfortable losing a regard for the humanity of all men and women than any time in my short life. And it's not a new thing, and patterns repeat themselves, and I think we're going through a cycle, personally. Other thoughts and comments? Philippians 3, verses 7 and 8. But whatever things were gained to me, those things I have counted as loss for the sake of Christ. More than that, I count all things to be loss in view of the surpassing value of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them but rubbish, in order that I may gain Christ. There are times when we do need ambivalence disorder, or I should say ambivalence order, maybe. There are times that we need to separate ourselves and pull back from that which has constrained us from having a relationship with Christ. That can involve our thinking patterns themselves. That can involve philosophies that we may have adopted. That can involve people that we may know in our lives. That may be actions that we have formerly taken. That may be lifestyles that we have formerly lived. But there are times when we need a radical departure from the prior things or thoughts or philosophies or whatever they are, in order to count them as nothing, count them as garbage, as rubbish, in order to gain Christ. This is true for us that don't see a problem with a pattern of our thinking, and it's true for us that may struggle with harmful patterns of thinking. We have to be ready to let go some things. Now, that's in order to replace it with something else. Those who have this isolation, ambivalence, don't want to replace it with anything else. They may be attempting to let go of some things that are harmful, some things that are stressful, but then they haven't filled it with something else. And it's our responsibility to see that what we're filling it with is a relationship with Christ. I'm going to introduce the next one, and that'll also give you a chance to think about it for Wednesday. This idea of loneliness. That is the headshot, I guess you'd say, of the former U.S. Attorney General Vivek Murthy. And he's the one who in 2023 declared that loneliness is a national epidemic. He made it a disease state, recognizing that it was a national health crisis, and he recognized that loneliness shortens physical life in about the same negative impact as being a habitual alcoholic drinker or having a smoking habit. Loneliness itself impacts the physical lifespan. Loneliness by itself creates or can create a whole host of physical weaknesses. But then loneliness also affects the mind and creates mental weakness as well. Loneliness is not uncommon to any of us. But again, we're talking about when it becomes habitual, when it becomes patternistic, when it when it looks like it's a choice rather than a state of circumstances. One can be alone, and that may be a healthy choice, but we certainly need to understand that that is not a healthy long-term choice. Myself, you, others can be in a room full of people. We can be in a stadium full of people. We can be in a city full of people and be as lonely as one who is in isolation, detention in a prison. The difference being we can erect those prison walls ourselves and keep ourselves from other people. Loneliness is summarized as a feeling not unlike the isolation issue, that no one else cares for my well-being, even if I'm going out of my way to take care of other people. Galatians 6:1-2 says, "Brethren, even if a man is caught up in a trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, each one looking to yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and thus fulfill the law of Christ." We have an opportunity to support those who are lonely. I received 3 cards in the mail yesterday when I went to my mailbox. And I thought of 2 things. I thought it's fun to get mail and get cards in the mailbox. And then I thought, I'm terrible at sending cards to people. One of them was a Father's Day card, and the other 2 were not. But I had had a pretty full day, and I was tired, and I made my dinner, and I got to read those cards. And they were helping. They were supportive. They told me that people cared. They told me that evidently I'm still radiating a sense of loneliness, which I probably am. But they wanted me to know that they cared. Bear one another's burdens. You will never know, in many cases, what a small act of kindness and attention may mean for someone else. You may never get acknowledgement of it. You may never understand the full impact of just being there for someone who has a sense of loneliness. We'll talk about loneliness more this coming Wednesday and how we can help break the cycle or the pattern for those who suffer from it on a long-term basis. I appreciate all the help today.